What do Transformers, Pitch Perfect 3, and Top Gun all have in common? Well, for one, they all have this message in the credits: a thank you to the United States Department of Defense. Hollywood's connection to the military is as old as the Oscars themselves.
This achievement is reflected each year in the Academy Award.
The 1927 World War I film Wings was produced alongside the Army and the Air Corps.
Air spectacle, dominated by remarkable aerial stunts.
The aerial and battle sequences were shot on Kelly Field, an Air Corps facility in San Antonio. The film featured around 300 pilots and 3,500 infantrymen. The film was so beloved, it went on to win the first Academy Award for Best Picture at the inaugural Oscars in 1929, the only silent film to earn the honor. Today, Hollywood and the government still maintain a stable working relationship. In a nondescript Los Angeles office building lies the media liaison offices for our nation's military. Working alongside the Department of Defense's Special Assistant for Entertainment Media, these offices assist in film and television production. The exact figures of how many projects the Department of Defense has worked on was unclear. That is, until a massive 2017 information dump. But before we get into that, subscribe to Cheddar and hit that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our new content. In 2017, a Freedom of Information Act request to the Department of Defense resulted in the release of nearly 4,000 documents regarding the military's involvement in film and television. The first documented case of military involvement in Hollywood came out of necessity back in 1917. The United States had remained neutral throughout the first years of World War I. The general public was split on U.S. involvement in the war, but in 1917, after naval attacks on U.S. merchant ships, Woodrow Wilson finally declared war against Germany. To rally a divided public, Wilson created the Committee on Public Information. Led by former muckraker George Creel, the CPI worked with magazines, newspapers, and film to spread propaganda to compel the American public to buy into the war effort. The Creel Committee censored potentially damaging material that could hurt the war effort. The CPI were so thorough in their work that, according to historians, every piece of news the average Midwestern family saw had been censored at some level, be it in conception, transit, or delivery of the story. Creel was not alone in wanting to use film to sway public support. William Brady, head of the National Association of the Motion Picture Industry, had sent a memo to the White House, wherein he urged President Wilson to work with Hollywood, stating, "The motion picture could be the most wonderful system for spreading national propaganda at little or no cost." The relationship between the government and Hollywood didn't end with the war. In fact, it continued well into World War II. The government created the Office of War Information a year after America's declaration of war. It aimed to create a line of communication between the battlefront and the American public. The OWI put out films, pamphlets, and magazines to boost morale and patriotism, working, as one spokesperson put it, to make sure that every man, woman, and child should be reached and moved by the message. The Bureau of Motion Pictures was placed under the discretion of the OWI, further progressing the existing relationship between the government and Hollywood. Together, the two assisted and oversaw a Hollywood production of war films and propaganda, from Fate Capra's Why We Fight series to anti-fascist films like Casablanca. These films were widely marketed to the public. During World War II, Hollywood released over 1,700 projects, 500 of which dealt with war-related material. Elmer Davis, head of the Office of War Information, said, "The motion picture is the most powerful instrument of propaganda in the world. The easiest way to inject a propaganda idea to most people's minds is to let it go through the entertainment picture when they do not realize they are being propagandized." The Motion Picture Production Office, MPPO for short, has worked on films like Armageddon, Transformers, and subsequent film Transformers: Revenge of the Fallen, and Iron Man. The Department of Defense even has a document outlining the rules producers must abide by if they want to work with the DoD. But to what extent does the Department of Defense influence Hollywood?
military representation is not just one war film or one television show, but a big mosaic of all these depictions put together. We kind of have our big collective story about what the military is doing in the world, what kind of institution it is. Making 100 or 1,000 little changes tends to kind of push the narrative in one direction.
That's Dr. Roger Stahl. He's a researcher, author of Militainment, Inc., and associate professor at the University of Georgia. He's been researching military involvement in film for years, looking at hundreds of film scripts and correspondence between the Department of Defense and Hollywood producers. So why do production companies reach out to the military?
It costs money to go without help. You want the most planes, the most explosions, and you also want the kind of credibility that comes with military actors.
But like most things in life, help from the Department of Defense isn't free. There are conditions and contracts that producers have to follow in order to make their film.
You send them your script and also an application. They're going to be monitoring the process all the way through, and they get a final screening. They want to know that the end product reflects the process that resulted in the contract. Sometimes they don't turn out the way the military wants, and they ask for cuts at the very end.
Transformers and Transformers Revenge of the Fallen are two action films that have both had massive success and been assisted by the military. Ian Bryce, a producer for Transformers, said, "Without the superb military support we've gotten on this film, it would be an entirely different looking film. We want to cooperate with the Pentagon to show them off in the most positive light. And the Pentagon, likewise, wants to give us the resources to be able to do that." In this instance, the relationship between Hollywood and the DoD is symbiotic. That being said, not every film with an American soldier is a film that's been worked on by the Department of Defense.
I've been a soldier since I was 19.
Films like Stanley Kubrick's Full Metal Jacket and Francis Ford Coppola's Apocalypse Now were both originally slated to have military assistance. But after failure to abide by DoD standards and being deemed too salacious, both films parted ways with the Department of Defense. However, they also went on to receive critical acclaim and public praise for their portrayals of wartime.
Pray! This is my rifle. There are many like it, but this one is mine.
Let's review. The Department of Defense has had a long-standing relationship with the powers that be in Hollywood. They've made changes on hundreds of occasions to film and television. The Department of Defense acts similarly to a public relations firm in that sense. The Department of Defense wants to be portrayed in the best light, as Ian Bryce said in reference to Transformers. To meet that end, they assist in the production and writing of multiple film and television projects, a practice that in itself harkens back to World War I. This has been a part of American history for decades. Whether it's for the benefit of the public, that's wholly up to context.
You know, really, this is a question of media literacy. This is a question of knowing at least some basic things about what happens behind the scenes to shape the images that we see every day on our screens.
This is why it's important to be a conscious viewer.
It must absolutely be attuned to the forces that are working behind the scenes to produce the media that we consume.
If we're informed viewers, we can not only spot instances such as this, but we can work together to urge the powers that be to do better and be more transparent with the public. Thanks again for watching. I'm Jake Munoz for Cheddar Explains, and we'll catch you next time. If you've made it this far, then you already know what time it is. If you haven't, hit that subscribe button and that notification bell so you don't miss out on any of our new content. And believe me, we've got some good things coming.